I ask myself a lot how I made a series of mistakes that they don't just seem dumb, they seem like the type of mistakes. Hi, my name is Sam, and this is my story.
It's an all-American story, packed with greed, power, politics, corruption, and incompetence.
I don't think I give a shit about my legacy. That's not what matters.
Hopes and dreams, soaring one minute, destroyed the next.
Oh, it went to zero!
Internet famous people.
Sam Bankman Fried, everything this man touches turns to gold.
No.
Actually famous people. Guys with great hair.
Okay, I think that's a good thing.
Guys with bad hair.
That's right.
Guys with almost no hair at all. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, baby. But most of all, money. Tons and tons of money. This is how Sam Bankman Fried took FTX to the moon and how it all blew up in his face. So let's get to know the players in this story. If you don't know Sam Bankman Fried's backstory, here's a brief rundown. SBF, as he's known, was born pretty rich. His parents were professors at Stanford. SBF went to MIT, got a degree in math and physics, so evidently he's a pretty smart guy. Considering his parents are law professors, he ought to know a little something about the law, too. He interned at a New York trading company called Jane Street, and then he went to work for him when he graduated. This is one of their recruiting videos.
It really was built for people who didn't know a lot about finance and were able to learn along the way.
Well, that sounds perfect. And here's a training video.
Even though we work in the financial industry, none of the questions we ask will require any finance knowledge.
This place sounds amazing. After a while, he left to work at a place called the Center for Effective Altruism. They had a mission of working on projects that had a positive impact in the world. Sounds great, right? I mean, the name.
There's a little out there.
Yeah, but it sounds great. The effective altruism movement does get a lot of criticism from some folks, though. I mean, not Vox.com. SBF paid them $200,000 to hype the idea. But there are others.
The effective altruist idea of earn to give is really nothing new.
Effective altruism is even one step more dangerous.
It's just a restatement of this old idea that the best way to help people is through the free market and business.
There's something very weird about it.
It's the same thing, what's the cult again? I keep forgetting.
They are taught to trust equations over their moral intuitions. It's sociopathic.
Through giving money away, yes, but never changing the system that makes the money.
And he spent some of his hard-earned money hiring a guy to make him this video.
Earn to give, which means his goal as a human is to make as much money as possible just to give it away. Earn to give.
Right? If you want to give big money, you gotta make big money. Step 1, get filthy rich. And Sam was well on his way. And soon, Sam was on the move again.
All right, so you started your own company. What was it called?
So Alameda Research is the first company I started up, and it was a crypto quant trading firm.
By January of 2018, they'd started making a bunch of money, taking advantage of something called arbitrage.
Bitcoin was trading on a lot of different crypto exchanges, and it was not trading at the same price on all of them. So you might see it trading for $10,000 on Coinbase and $10,100 on Bitstamp. And, in theory, there's a 1% arbitrage to do there, trading those against each other.
It was simple, but it worked. And in 2019, SBF started FTX with his business partner, Gary Wang, a bunch of his old coworkers from Jane Street, and some classmates from MIT. That's our second group of players. And I gotta pause here. I'm not here to judge. I'm not telling you how to have fun, but all 10 of these people were in and out of relationships together. Hey, they're adults. They can do what they want.
Hey, my name's Paul. This is just between y'all.
But when you have a bunch of this kind of stuff happening, things can get a little complicated. Another complication, they were doing a ton of drugs.
And that's cool. That's cool.
The problem is, all this complicated stuff has a tendency to blow up at just the wrong time. But For now, things were going great. The money was flowing, there were tons of glowing articles. The FTX crew was sitting on top of the world. They all moved into a $40 million mansion in the Bahamas. Cryptocurrency was absolutely blowing up in 2021, and FTX was one of the leaders, doing things nobody thought was possible. But behind the scenes, there was a darker story unfolding. There were cracks in this facade if you knew what to look for. Hell, you could see the cracks even if you had your head in the sand. Unfortunately, a lot of folks did.
Example.
All right, for example, this is Caroline Ellison. That's SBF's ex-girlfriend.
Trying to think of a good example of a trade where I've lost a ton of money. Well, I don't know. I probably don't want to go into specifics too much with that.
She's the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company talking about doing amphetamines. Nothing like regular amphetamine use to make you appreciate how dumb a lot of normal, non-medicated human experience is.
Yeah, absolutely could pull it off without my math degree. I use very little math.
And nobody seemed to notice. So we've got Sam Bankman Fried, this 30-year-old genius, unbelievably popular in the press, on social media. Seems like the most unlikely billionaire ever. Seems like a warning sign to me. The biggest warning sign came in an interview with Bloomberg, where he basically described selling a token like FTT, which was the utility token of the FTX exchange, as a Ponzi scheme. It's a pretty long video, so let me paraphrase. You build a box. You put money in the box. That makes other people put money in the box, and suddenly it's worth millions. You take more money out than you put in.
You describe it in this totally cynical way. It sounds like it should be zero, but go on.
In the world that we're in, if you do this, everyone's going to be like, ooh, box token. Maybe it's cool. If you buy a box token, that's going to appear on Twitter and it'll have a $20 million market cap.
And even that, months before the meltdown, got little more than a few laughs from the internet.
He accidentally describes a Ponzi scheme, which is just sort of like really funny.
Sam kept doing a bunch of interviews. He hosted conferences on cryptocurrency. They blew tons of cash sponsoring an NBA arena. They put their logo on Major League Baseball umpire uniforms. And they spent millions on luxuries in the Bahamas. Food, flight, hotels, whatever they wanted, they went out and got it. But the reality is, Sam Bankman-Fried's brand of cryptocurrency wasn't really revolutionary. All they did was figure out a way to take the same old financial fraud and give it a new skin, to appeal to a new demographic. They were exciting, because this wasn't the same old finance of yesteryear. The FTX crew did it cheaper, faster, and with really bad hair. There were warning signs all over the place, and nobody paid attention. I wonder why. And nobody ignored this problem more than our next group of players, the press.
Let's talk about what's going on with Sam Bankman-Fried.
Sam Bankman-Fried. He's the CEO of the cryptocurrency exchange FTX and one of America's youngest billionaires.
The guy you see next to me is the most generous billionaire in the world.
FTX reports over $1 billion in revenue last year and is on track for earning another $1.1 billion this year.
In less than 5 years, Sam Bankman-Fried went from buying his first Bitcoin to becoming a crypto billionaire.
They call him the White Knight. We call him the Mother Teresa of crypto.
So why should you care about a floppy-haired, vegan, fidget-spinning crypto billionaire who occasionally sleeps on a beanbag chair?
JP Morgan, this generation, Sam Bankman-Fried's FTX.
They said this guy is different. He's a philanthropist. He drives a reasonable car.
Where's your car?
It's that one there.
That's like what, a Toyota?
Yeah, it's a Corolla.
He ran a multi-billion-dollar company wearing shorts and a t-shirt. He had this ridiculous hair. He was splashing money all over the place, and everybody seemed willing to give him a pass. They were young, allegedly smart, and ready to take big risks. They made massive donations to political candidates, publicly over $40 million to the Democratic Party. But in secret, they donated even more to the Republicans, and nobody paid attention. And there was this secret connection between Alameda Research and FTX. That was a lit fuse that could come to destroy the company. And it should have been really well known. A lot of FTX employees knew about it. but nobody cared. So the big scandal is this. They took money that folks had put into Alameda research and they bet it on other cryptocurrencies. Now that's all well and good if the market is going up, except that it's not, it's totally illegal, but you can get away with it for a while if the market is going up. The problem is, the market doesn't just go up, and it didn't. But these warning signs, these clear indications that things weren't as they seemed, they were completely ignored. The press was too busy fawning all over the FTX crew. Because, as inexperienced as they were, Sam Bankman Fried seemed to have a knack for saying exactly what the press wanted to hear, and they absolutely loved him for it. This is actually part of a much bigger problem with the mainstream media. With the rise of the internet, anybody can create news content, or at least content that passes as news. There's been a flood of new voices, and that's splintered the market for news. Now, instead of following the facts, more and more outlets decide on what demographic they want to appeal to, then they publish stories to hit their target demographic right in the feels. Just like social media algorithms reward outrage with more views,
What is my problem?
the mainstream media is rewarded by giving their desired audience exactly what they want. It's like they've found a choir to preach to. For a lot of news outlets, looking too deep into SBF and the rest of the FTX crew, that wasn't what their audience wanted to hear. Sam Bankman Fried seems to be a classic narcissist fraud, and if you've ever met one, you'll know they're some of the most interesting people you could ever want to meet. That means a lot of clicks and a lot of revenue. And as good as he was at selling his company to investors, he was even better at selling his narrative. But it wasn't just the press that wanted to get to know SBF that was willing to look past all of these obvious red flags. There were a lot better dressed people to come.
Did he say he hates you?
He did.
Even on the phone, that guy sounds handsome.
It was all a house of cards.
It's a safe and easy way to get into crypto.
And there was a big storm blowing in.
Yeah, I don't think so. And I'm never wrong about this stuff. Never.
You might see some overlap between these celebrities and the press, because these days, well, what's the difference? SBF had plenty of cash and he wasn't afraid to use it. So if you had some fame, it didn't really matter what kind. Maybe you could throw a ball. Maybe you could shoot a ball, hit a ball. Maybe you're a funny guy. Or maybe you've got a big audience on social media.
It's an older Toyota. He doesn't even have window tints on a completely stock Toyota.
What does that have to do with anything?
Sam was ready to hand you some cash so you could help promote this incredible business opportunity to folks around the world. There was a lot going on in 2022. May to July of that year, there were a bunch of cryptocurrency scams and collapses. Terra Luna was the big one. That bankrupted a bunch of crypto lenders like Celsius, Voyager, and BlockFi. So FTX stepped in to bail out BlockFi and Voyager, and everybody sees FTX as being the good guy, helping keep crypto afloat so people don't lose everything. But not everything was going so great down in the Bahamas. Aside from gambling investor money, the FTX crew was blowing massive amounts of cash on luxuries. They spent $40 million on food, flights, and hotels in just 9 months of 2022. Then, it happened. November 2nd, the day it all unraveled. CoinDesk published an article that blew the lid off the whole operation. It was all there. The shady connection between Alameda Research and FTX, where they were taking customer deposits and making really risky bets. The only real asset they had was a massive amount of FTT tokens. The problem is, those weren't very liquid, meaning they were tough to trade for actual money. So folks were scared that FTX was having big-time money troubles, and they were. On November 6th, Changpeng Zhao, known as CZ, said his company Binance, which was one of FTX's main rivals, was planning to sell off over $500 million worth of the FTT token. People got scared. They were desperate. There was a run on the exchange, and people were begging to get their money off of FTX. But FTX froze all transactions. On November 8th, FTX reached a tentative agreement to sell the company to Binance. November 9th, Binance backs out of the deal. And over the course of a few days, the price of the FTT token plummeted from $24 to under $3. $32 billion down the drain. That kind of money has a tendency to attract attention, so at the same time all of this was going down, the SEC was finally investigating. November 10th, Bahamian financial regulators froze all of FTX's assets. November 11th, FTX filed for bankruptcy and replaced Sam Bankman Fried with a new CEO. His name is John Ray. That same day, FTX got hacked, and I'm doing air quotes here, hacked, and over $300 million was moved off the exchange, which is pretty interesting timing, I gotta say. SBF blamed an employee or malware on an ex-employee's computer. November 12th, the Wall Street Journal finally did a big report on the scheme. November 14th, the New York federal prosecutor began to investigate FTX for securities violations. And later in November, there was a class action lawsuit against a bunch of the people who had hyped FTX and FTT. Maybe Larry David should have listened to his own advice.
It stinks.
On December 12th, SBF was arrested in the Bahamas. His parents bailed him out in December just before Christmas. Must be nice to have $250 million in bail money just sitting around. And speaking of having tons of money sitting around, that's our last group of players, the politicians. You got a bunch of these politicians lining up, ready to tear each other apart. Doesn't matter what side you're on, there's always somebody to blame. Congress, the president, the ex-president. Gary Gensler. Throw a rock and you'll hit a scapegoat.
Do me a favor, Fink. Throw it hard.
This is Tom Emmer, a U.S. representative from Minnesota. They call him the Crypto King of Congress. He says the FTX collapse is all a failure of the Biden administration, who should have been paying more attention. He mostly blames Gary Gensler, the chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Emmer went on to Fox Business to talk about it.
Where was he on Celsius? Where was he on Voyager? Where was he on Terra Luna? And now, where was Gary Gensler on the FTX? Yeah. This is exactly what he's supposed to be doing.
Okay, sounds like we found the bad guy, right? Well, not so fast, because back in March, before all the House of Cards collapsed, Emmer was one of 8 members of Congress who wrote a letter to Gensler telling him he was overstepping his bounds by harassing crypto companies.
Gary Gensler at the SEC, he wants to regulate crypto to the full extent of his authority, and then he wants Congress to grant him even more authority.
So you're dumping on a guy who tried to do what you're dumping on him for not doing.
Sounds like you're doing a lot to make sure there is no fraud or other manipulation. Thank you, Mr. Bankman Fried.
Thank you. Well, that's not Gary Gensler, that's Tom Emmer. The real problem with cryptocurrency is the same problem as with just about everything today. The entire system is broken. Cryptocurrency was created to offer an alternative to the big banks, and that could be great. The 6 biggest banks in America have over $14 trillion in assets. That's more than half of our GDP. We bailed them out back in 2008, and they've grown 77% since then. So maybe cryptocurrency could help. But it can't help if it's still this wild west of rug pulls and scams with internet-famous jackasses shilling garbage coins while shady companies make billions. In 2022, people lost over $28 billion in crypto scams. If you don't have some regulation, it just swaps out which rich people get to rip everybody off. It's a big game of musical chairs, and when the music stops, it's always the little guy who's left without a seat. Because that dirty secret that caused this whole collapse in the first place, the system is built to fail.